This is the Protestant Libertarian Podcast, a project of the Libertarian Christian Institute and part of the Christians for Liberty Network. I really hope that you guys enjoy today's show. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Protestant Libertarian Podcast. Returning to the show today is my friend Erik from the great country of Sweden, all the way, halfway across the world from where I'm sitting in Kentucky. Had him on about a year ago just to give me his perspective on everything. Erik is a socialist. He's from, like I said, not the United States, so a real outsider's perspective on a lot of these events that are going on in the world. And Erik and I have been mutuals on Twitter for a long time now. We disagree on some things, but then very surprisingly agree on a lot of other things too. So with everything going on in the world right now, I wanted to have him back on to have his take on just everything that's happening in the world. So Erik, welcome back to the Protestant Libertarian Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this a lot.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to talk to you. I know that I had some new listeners since the last time you were on the show. So before we get into everything today, just tell my audience a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Erik. A very Swedish name. I am 27 years old. I have ADD and autism. I am very into video gaming, and I love politics. Ideologically, I'm a socialist, and philosophically, I'm a Marxist. So, yeah, very much so left. I'm a revolutionary. I call myself a radical with pride. And yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, no, I really do think that this is one of the interesting things. And I think one of the reasons why you and I get along so well is that you're really are, at least from an American perspective, a part of the dissident left. Like before I really started studying political philosophy, I had grown up in a cultural context where everyone just kind of assumed that, whatever the Democratic Party represented must have been kind of the mainstream ideology of those that hold to these positions on the left. But after interacting with a lot of people like you, and then reading some of the communist literature itself, I realized that there's actually a huge gap between the average American, quote unquote progressive, and then where someone like you stands. And so it's really interesting that because we're both political dissidents, we have a lot of overlapping positions. And I guess that's one of the things that I wanted to really ask you about today, maybe even before we talk about Trump. I want to get your perspective on the American left, because I know you recommended to me Midwestern Marx, and I've had Noah Kratchvik on my show before, and I'm going to have him back on in about a month or so just to talk about everything that's going on. And he's a communist, and they very much support, the American Communist Party, but on a lot of really important issues, we're in complete agreement. And he seems to have a lot of perspectives that diverge from the left in the United States. So what's your take on kind of like mainstream leftist culture in the U.S. and abroad? Can you get along with them? Do you think that they've lost their way? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't. I'm not exactly sure on what I think. I mean, I understand and agree with a lot of criticism that Noah, amongst others, have for the modern left in America. But then I don't agree with all their criticisms. But I can definitely understand like the appeal of the American Communist Party, because while there have been some parties and organizations in America that have been left, like the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA for example, but they haven't really gotten anywhere, I mean, they have technically gotten somewhere, but they haven't really made an actual impact. So people have been yearning for these past years for some kind of organization or party or anything on the left that actually has real potential of doing something. And I think that has been the biggest problem of the American left. not so much that it has been like wrong think or whatever, or wrong opinions. I think it's been more that there's just not really been unity. And I also very much agree with Noah and Midwestern Mark's take on what they call the purity fetish, which I think he's talked to you. You've
Yeah.
talked about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely see what they're getting at, and I agree with them. I've been more hostile myself in the past toward people with differing opinions, and I do have my fair share of red lines. Like, if this is your opinion, then fuck you, pretty much. But I am also like trying to be realistic that, okay, this person, maybe they are a little bit bigoted, and I don't like that, I don't approve of that, but they are working class just like me, so maybe we can like look past that, at least temporarily, and somewhere down the line maybe they will become more progressive when it comes to social views. I don't know, but I don't want to just throw everyone away or whatever, like leave people behind just because they don't believe everything I believe. Like, there's socialist and communist organizations and parties across the world that, for example, aren't very progressive regarding LGBT. I am very pro LGBT, but I still support these parties and organizations because I know that, you know, because of their material conditions, they haven't really had time to think about the social. They need to think more about the economic situations because maybe they are a third world country that's been destabilized by imperialism for hundreds of years. So who am I to sit here in Sweden and like judge them for not being perfect on LGBT issues? Like, I wish they would have been, but realistically, that's something I think they can improve on later down the road. Maybe when they don't have the boot of America up their ass.
Right.
So like, I think a lack of unity and lack of organization, um, and also a purity fetish have pretty much been the bane of the American left, and frankly, the left in all of the Western world, but especially so in America.
Yeah, I want to get your perspective too on just the way that I think that the Democratic Party in particular in the United States seems to be completely in bed with the military industrial complex. When I was coming of age, this was like maybe 15 years ago and really starting to think about politics for the first time. This was at the height of the US war on terror. And the only people in the United States that were mainstream that seemed to be critical of the American warfare state were people on the left. And it was like at this time where it was all leftist that were skeptical of giant corporations and then skeptical of America's never ending wars. And that was very appealing to me back then because I held to those views as well. I was like, this doesn't seem like it's right. But in the 2024 election in the United States, it was amazing how many Democrats were willing not even just to overlook the fact that the Biden-Harris administration had funded 2 new wars, but like almost celebrated it to a certain extent. Like there were many people on the left that were defending, Ukraine and defending Israel. And it just seems like the Democratic Party has just they become another party that supports these never-ending wars. And I wanted to get your perspective on that because I know that that's something that you're very passionate about as well. And like we would both be in complete agreement that this is just another manifestation of American imperialism, and it doesn't seem like there's and obviously I think that the American right, save for maybe the fringe, is kind of hopeless in this issue, but it seems like the left is kind of lost their way too.
Yeah. Could you specify your question?
Yeah, I guess I would just say what do you make of the fact that a lot of people that claim to be on the American left seem to also be in favor of American imperialism. Maybe rhetorically they're not, but when it comes to actually supporting American military policy, they always seem to support more war.
Yeah, that's. I think the best response I can give to that is actually by broadening the question and talk about the left in the Western world overall, and not just in regards to imperialism, but, well, the Western perspective, Western chauvinism, um, because, you know, each individual is pretty much a product of their genes combined with their environment. And even leftists are, brought up in these liberal environments um, in the Western world. So even if uh, they like, there's so many leftists, especially social democrats, that have like these really great ideas that both you and I would agree with, like better healthcare and, I don't know, free school and stuff like that. And it's like, oh, that's awesome. But then they'll turn around and they will repeat like talking points about China
Right.
or Russia. And it, because, and I yeah, it can be difficult being a Western leftist myself, because I was like that myself. I was like, fuck China, fuck Russia, but then I've grown, I've become a Marxist, I've learned how to actually analyze things and look at the real material world, and I've come to better understandings, and yeah, so it's um yeah, I think one big issue is actually a lack of curiosity, of daring to just question things. Um, like when the very beginning of me becoming a revolutionary socialist and even Marxist, it was me basically daring to ask myself, okay, why are there all these people that are defending Joseph Stalin? Why are there all these people in the West who are defending the Soviet Union? Everybody knows they were bad, right? But then you see like declassified CIA documents where they on black and white admit, no, Joseph Stalin was actually not a dictator. And it's like, gasp, what the hell? That's what I've been told my entire life. So what is true and what isn't? And so I was actually curious. I let myself be curious, and I let myself question the narratives I've been told. And um, yeah, that's how I personally got to where I am. Whereas there are a lot of other people that still haven't gotten there, and I know this analogy or whatever has been done to death, but it does actually really feel like the Matrix. Like like you yourself have been unplugged, and then you have all these other people that are still living within the system, and it's like it's not like I or others like me think that we are superior for because we know the truth or whatever. It's not, it doesn't have anything to do with superiority. It's more like we see that we have a responsibility to do what we can to pull more people outside the system, because, well, yeah. And the quick extra thing to that's also important, about how information works. It's not like one tiny cabal that's controlling everything. It's basically, everything connects in one way or another. So, and it's the same thing with information, how it spreads and what have you. So some institution that has one motive might spread some kind of information, and then some news station picks up on that, and they then spread that information further. and then like a department of education gets a hold of that information and then decides, well, this seems good, and then they teach their students that, and then those students become adults and they further that information wherever. So it's like, it's not a cabal that's like controlling everything. It's well, a very intricate net of information, or however I should um, describe it as, which is why um, people don't see the truth, basically. I
Yeah.
hope you get what I mean.
No, I totally understand that. And that's one of the things that I'm completely with you on, the fact that people need to ask more difficult questions about the nature of reality. There are a lot, it's like you said, culture is kind of accidental to a certain extent, whereas there are these ideas that are out there. And the more and more that people share those ideas, they come to hold them. And there's like a lack of willingness to challenge these well-established conventions. And I just think, like, for myself, I remember growing up in like the American public school system, where every day you have to stand up and, put your hand over your heart and say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And then when you become older, you're not supposed to trust your government, because you've spent your entire life essentially saying that whatever the government narrative is the correct one. And so that creates this cultural environment where if a CIA official gets on CNN or Fox News and says this is what's going on around the world, we believe them, because that's America, and we're on the right side of history, and we know that. So I think once you start pushing on that even a little bit, it becomes very obvious that the real world is a lot more complicated than the mainstream narratives would like us to believe that they are. And I love that image of being unplugged from the Matrix, because the Matrix was one of my favorite movies growing up, and I love that idea. How do you think that we go about waking more people up, given the fact that there are all of these kind of cultural incentives for people to not ask difficult questions? How do we help people like think about things differently than you can either pick this option or this option, and there's no other option out there?
Well, a very big thing that keeps people from quote unquote unplugging is peer pressure and groupthink. And I don't actually mean that in like a inherently negative way, but it's like that's part of human nature, basically, that we are at our core, collectivists, because we want to belong. Everyone wants to belong and not stand out, and like stand out in a bad way. We don't want to be pushed out by others, um, and that helps people not to see things and to ignore things that are staring them in their face, because if they start questioning what they know, then what will the other people, like all the people in their life, what will they think if they start questioning things? Will they be bullied? Will they be ostracized? Like, what will happen then? And which is why I think it's so important to understand that you are never alone in questioning the official narrative. I mean, for crying out loud, there's even groups of people out there that are questioning the moon landing.
Right.
They are questioning that the Earth is round. So, like, which is also actually a reason why these groups exist, because they find belonging by being in these groups. That's something that they find a comfort in, knowing that there are others thinking these same theories that they do. But yeah, I think showing people like actual verifiable historic facts combined with letting them know that you are not alone, I think that is not all there is to it. I've actually pondered about this myself a lot. And it's so difficult, and it makes you wish that someone was like documenting your life, because I don't remember exactly how I became radicalized. Like I can remember some key parts, and go back like in time, and look at old posts I've made or whatever when I believed something different, but I don't remember the specifics, the details, what exactly made me question this or that, what made me actually believe this or that. I don't fully remember that, and I think that is also an issue, because I find myself not being, not always being like um I forgot the word, but like it's almost like I want to rush other people to come to unplug. Like, come on, don't you see the truth? I see the truth, because it's difficult remembering how you yourself became unplugged, and so once you have become unplugged, you just want to get to it because now you know the truth. So everyone should believe it, but it's so yeah, I can't fully answer like satisfactory your question, because that's something that I'm wondering myself.
Yeah, no, but I completely understand what you're saying. There are a lot of people that once you wake up inside the system and it becomes very obvious to you that the narratives that are propagated by mainstream sources are all wrong, you just want to like kind of grab people and shake them and be like, "You have to stop believing in them." But I'm
Yes.
with you on that. Yeah, but it's like, but it takes a long time, and it took years and years and years for me to get where I am now, and I'm continuing to develop and refine my ideas, and so I have to have, I guess, the humility to extend that to other people. And I think
Yeah,
that this,
same here.
yeah, and it's true. And these are, it's not, and it's like you were saying before, we're all the product of our social and cultural environment. And yeah, genetics do play a role in that, but I think that people often underestimate just how deeply we're shaped by these social forces, and that we take them for granted. And unless you are willing to even like step back and reflect upon your own social location, I think it's impossible for people to realize the extent to which their values and their worldview are just completely shaped by their cultural environment. And all of that really is just an accident of where you happen to be born. Like we don't really have any control over that, but it does powerfully shape us. And until you're willing to, I guess, grapple with that, a lot of people aren't going to have they're not even going to have the desire to, well, it's not, maybe not even a matter of desire. I don't think that a lot of people understand that there's even a question to be asked about that. Like they just assume, well, I grew up in this culture, therefore it must be, these values must be correct. And that's kind of the end of the story for most people. And I think we do have to try really hard to convince people that this isn't it. There might be more to it than they anticipate, but that's not easy to do.
There's also the time and energy factors that your average person like studies in school or goes to work 5 days a week, and they might not have the energy and or time to really go and look into like what was the Soviet Union actually like. So they will just go with what everybody else is saying, because why bother? I don't have time for that. I don't have
Right.
energy. So that is also a factor that one must consider.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, and that's been one of my biggest. And it's not, I guess, it's not even really a frustration for me, but I do kind of understand that, because a lot of my, just, I'm in my mid-30s, and so I have kids, and a lot of my friends are in that same position where they have kids, and they're just in that phase of life where it's about making sure that their kids are involved and working their jobs and taking care of their house. And so I think that there are like very special people like you and me that actually care about these issues and are willing to put the time and the energy into studying them. But most of the people that I know don't really really care about this. Like if they hear something on the news, they'll be like, yeah, I don't think this is right or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But they're not going to sit down and read a 250-page book on political philosophy. They're just not going to do it because they're not interested in that. And so I do think that the hard part of that is helping people understand why these issues are important and why they should dedicate their scarce time to thinking about them.
And to add to that, I like nobody has to become like an expert in history or philosophy. Like just do whatever you can do, however small. Like like to be completely honest with you, the only socialist writing I have actually read is the Communist Manifesto. I haven't read Capital or Imperialism by Lenin or any of the other great things. And for me personally, it's because I haven't been motivated, which has to do with my ADD. So I have a legitimate excuse. But I have spent countless hours just reading up on stuff online and watching YouTube videos that do go into detail into historic things and philosophy and actually bring up a bunch of sources and documents and everything. So there are also more ways to learn about complex issues than just reading or listening to seminars or whatever. So like that's what I recommend everybody do. Just do something,
Right.
anything, the smallest of thing to try and educate yourself how the world works and the real history of the world. Do the smallest thing. Watch a YouTube video or two.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that there are so many resources out there right now. It's very easy to find information if you want to. I do think that's kind of the perfect segue to what I wanted to ask you next, which is about the second Trump term in the United States, because obviously, and I think that, some people would say this is for better. I think that you and I would both agree that this is probably for worse. But whatever's going on in American politics does affect the rest of the world, because the United States is kind of the great global empire at this point in human history. And I'm of two minds about the Trump phenomenon, because as an American, I don't think that in terms of policy, Trump is that much different from his predecessors. Now, if you look at American media, they look at Donald Trump as this great anomaly and that he represents a divergence from the political leadership of the past. But his policies are, especially in terms of foreign policy, no different than, George W. Bush and Barack Obama and Joe Biden. I see him in a direct line of continuity between those three presidents and even the ones that came before them. And so I don't think that Trump is as unique of a factor, but what he's done to American culture, or at least what like the way that American culture has responded to Trump's presidency, that's what's really changed things. And I think that there are a lot of people, even in Trump's base now, that are starting to ask very difficult questions that the political class in the United States aren't prepared to answer. And so in a certain extent, I do feel like, regardless of the way that the media is portraying Trump, it's business as usual politically, but culturally things are changing in the United States. And it's like what you were saying, there are more people that are willing to ask difficult questions and then go out there and try to find answers than ever before. And it's been really interesting seeing on some very important issues, Trump's base turn against him, which doesn't happen very often in American political life. Like I was telling you before the show that I was on vacation this week and took a break from the news. So I haven't been in the news except for I did like 10 minutes of reading before coming on the episode today, and seeing a bunch of major Republican influencers coming out against Trump's tariffs. That's something that we haven't usually seen before. And then people being willing to, challenge Trump on his stance on the vaccines, regardless of what you think about that. It's just interesting that his base would say, you know what, even though we support you politically, we're not going to support you on this issue. It does seem like it's at least opened up the door to having people ask questions that they wouldn't have asked before. I wanted to get your perspective on all of this, because you're an outsider. And I know we talked a little bit last time, obviously we're going through the campaign, just about your perspective on that. I know that like Noah Kratchvik's perspective from Midwestern Marx is that he kind of looks as he looks at Trump as like a sledgehammer who in some ways is giving people permission to ask questions that might lead them to answers that the mainstream political class doesn't want. And so he would see that aspect of Trump as a positive. But I want to get your thoughts on that. What do you think about the second Trump term, maybe him as a president, and then just the way that this is influencing the culture, not just in the United States, but around the world?
Well, so it's both true and false that Donald J. Trump is different, because it really depends on what you're talking about specifically. Because as you're saying, his foreign policy is right up there with everybody before him. Like he's just continuing the genocide that Biden started or helped start and financed, and there's like no difference there. And but like the big thing that makes Trump stand out is like all the other presidents and politicians in general, they have charm, they have decor, they are behaving, they do these it's like political theater or something. They are performing how you expect politicians to perform. So like Obama, who is considered by many to be like the most charming or whatever president in modern time, the guy that a guy that you could like high five in the street or something and be like, "Yo, what's up, Obama?" Mm-hmm. And he would be like, "Yo, what's up?" back or something. Like that's the kind of energy we've gotten from him. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, he's been bombing more people than like any of the other presidents. Whereas Donald Trump, he just can't shut his mouth up. Like he is someone that speaks his mind all the time, for better or for worse. Yeah. And like he lacks that kind of standard political theater that we are also used to. So that is like the biggest thing that actually makes him stand out, because he's like, fuck these theaters, put all the spotlights on me, I'm gonna do my own thing. But then it's pretty much all talk, and then when it comes to actual policies, it's very little difference from other administrations. But when it comes to this particular term of his, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't think it would be this bad. Like I thought it would pretty much just follow up after Biden, like being continuously becoming sort of worse and worse, as you would expect. But then he came up with like these tariffs, which are angering so many people, and it's like to a degree fucking up the entire world economy. And things like threatening Greenland of all fucking places. Right. like the sitting president of the United States literally saying, like, word for word, we might militarily invade Greenland if we want to take it by force if you don't give it to us. Like, that kind of blatant speaking your mind kind of thing, like it's really it's something else. So I've actually kind of started being glad that he was elected, because he is just fucking up the American empire so good that, like, even the rest of the West is slowly but surely moving away from America, and that is something that I'm personally very happy to see. And there's even been like Western talks with China about certain things. And that is something that has actually surprised me. Um, uh, so yeah, it's actually really great to see like Europe decoupling from America and starting to broaden their horizon when it comes to like economic partnerships and what have you. So in that sense, I'm actually glad that Trump got elected president, because he's like unpredictable, which is actually something funny. You know how like in the West it's always portrayed that Vladimir Putin loves Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Well, Putin, I think he has actually said himself, if I'm not mistaken, that he actually prefers Kamala Harris because Donald Trump is so unpredictable.
Yeah.
And when you are a leader of a country, you want to preferably deal with other leaders that are predictable, that you understand them. Nobody understands Donald Trump. I don't even think Donald Trump understands Donald Trump sometimes. Um, which is also funny when it comes to how much he lies and also says truth. Because, like, I legitimately think he's a pathological liar. Like,
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
I think he quite literally, like, literally cannot keep himself from lying. I think that's his nature. But at the same time, there's a lot of other times when he is actually speaking the truth. And so it's almost becomes like a game where you got to figure out when is he actually lying, when is he telling the truth. um I think he years ago he was actually kind of funny, because he was something like, I know they're like Hillary is cheating the system, I know because I'm doing it myself, or something like that.
Yeah.
So he tells the truth sometimes, and other times he's just lying out of his ears. So yeah, I'm personally not a fan of him, but him being elected shows the world better actually what America stands for, and that is the last thing I will say before you speak up, and it's that I actually think that Donald Trump is like the perfect representation of what the real America is, because all the other presidents, they're just faking things.
Right.
He's
Yeah.
he's much more real. Like, he is openly talking about invading Greenland, like straight up imperialism, like old school imperialism, and him talking about that openly. That's not like um something unique. I mean, the fact he's talking about it openly is unique, but the action of actually doing it is not unique. I mean, wasn't Hawaii like colonized in the 50s or
Yeah.
something?
And Alaska
Like,
too. Yeah.
yeah, like they were taken over within many people's lifetime. That wasn't that long ago. And there are other territories that America owns, like Puerto Rico,
Mhm.
without them actually being fully incorporated into the United States. So what he's saying isn't something new. What is new is that he's actually honest about it, meaning he is a better representative of the real America, because his unpredictability, the fact that he is not really anybody's friend, he's only looking out for himself and gaining power, and he's talking about imperialism and supporting Israel and all that. Like, I think he's the perfect representative of the actual real America, and which, by the way, of course, is not anything. I don't mean anything mean toward you or
Yeah. It's
your
the American political
viewers or
system. Yeah. Yeah.
listeners. Yeah, it's like the real America, as in like the country and the main culture and the economic system and what have you. Of course, not every single person in America.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with your characterization of Trump right there. And I think that's one of the reasons why there is such a hysterical popular response to Donald Trump in the past. Your description of American political theater is spot on. You know that these kinds of conversations that Trump will post on Truth Social, they happen behind closed doors in every single other presidential administration in American history. They were never dumb enough to just say it out in public. But Trump, he shoots from the hip, and he's, a kind of a New York crap talker. That's just the way that he is. And so he'll get out there on True Social and be like, "Oh, I think we need Greenland. We need to take this over. We need to make Greenland the 51st state." And that the Obama or Bush's foreign policy experts, they were probably having conversations that were very similar to that, but they never ever would have had the president come out and just say it. And that's what makes Trump so interesting, is that he just says what he thinks. And I completely agree that I do think that this exposes kind of the hypocrisy of the American political system in general, is that we like, and Americans are susceptible to this. We want politicians that say the right things regardless of what they actually do. And with Trump, we have a politician who's doing the exact same things as the other politicians and then just coming out and saying it. But it is also interesting with him too, because I don't think that he has any real political principles other than the fact that he wants to be great and that he wants to be perceived as a great president. But it is really interesting that he's like the only president in my lifetime that has come out on multiple occasions and said, well, we have this military industrial complex, and it seems like we're just fighting all these wars so these defense companies can make money. And it's wild to hear the American response to something like that, where you have these political pundits on both the left and the right that say that's so reckless and dangerous. But like, Trump's not wrong when he asks those kinds of questions. It would just be nice if he would like follow through and actually do something about it instead of endorsing the same policies that he's been questioning. So I agree, he's totally a wild card. But to the extent that I think that the irony of Trump's presidency might be that he is perceived as being so reckless by the rest of the world that the rest of the world actually bands together, and maybe in this kind of ironic way, the world will be more peaceful after Trump's term too, in spite of him, not because of him. And I just think that there's a lot of very interesting potential for developments that we didn't anticipate. It's just a very strange phenomenon all around.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So we got about 20 minutes left today, and there were a couple of things that you really wanted to talk about on the show, and I'm excited to get your perspective on them. But the first thing that you wanted to discuss was the fact that you recently joined a new socialist party in Sweden. And I must confess that I know almost nothing about Swedish politics, except you guys do have a parliamentary system, right? So is that the way you're...
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to us about the new socialist party that you joined. Why did you join it? How is it different than like other socialist parties? Because I'm sure there's more than one. So just talk to us about that.
So first things first, the parliament, it's like, what is it? 7 or 8 parties that like sits there and does stuff. It's what's called Riksdag in Swedish. I think Germany has something similar, like Reichstag or something like that. Basically Parliament, but another name. And there are like... It's basically split down the middle between rightist parties and leftist parties. But so the name of this new party that I'm a part of is called Solidarity, and it began last year, and it was started by a couple of people from the party that is simply called the Left Party, and it's the leftmost party in the Riksdag or Parliament, and the reason they went out of the party was because they were basically kicked out. And they were kicked out for anti-Semitism. But the thing is, and I've actually checked this, what they've said and posted, and it's not anti-Semitic. It's the classical, they said something upsetting about Israel,
Yeah.
and in support of Palestine. And it's like some Zionist Jewish organization or whatever that was like, that's anti-Semitism, and they like stirred up something, and the Left Party, which used to be a communist party um, long ago, but then it became socialist, and then these past like decades or so, it's basically been what I would personally consider to be a downgrade to like a social democratic party, where it's like split. Some are communists, some are socialists, some are social democrats, but they are definitely to the left of the other social democratic parties. But they have went more rightward, closer to the other left parties, which are more toward the center. So it left its communism and even embraced like anti-communism and what have you. And last year was the last straw for these few individuals. Some were kicked out and some left because of what happened. And they went together and formed this new party, which is ideologically socialist, not communist technically, but it's friendly toward communists and communist parties. And philosophically, it's a Marxist party. So it's right up my alley. I of course looked up their policies and what have you, and talked to them through online chat before I joined, because I was politically homeless and I was looking for somewhere to belong. So yeah, they are like a proud revolutionary, true leftist party that is that doesn't want to like compromise away its own identity just to get some power, or just to get a sit at the table with the other parties. It's like it's proud of what it is, and it's not that many members currently, but I think it's steadily growing. Um, and I have been personally on the two first big meetings, and I think it's in April that the party will have its first congress, and there will actually be a bunch of other leftist parties invited, um, and I'm looking forward to that. Um, which brings me to, there are actually quite a few leftist parties in Sweden, even outside the parliament, a bunch of different ones, and this is something that I am very proud of with Solidarity, is that even though it's not even existed for a year, it's already like out there and trying to organize with other parties to create this united leftist front, because actually, much like America, we are very disorganized. The only difference being that we have a bunch of smaller organizations, but we don't have any big unity on the left. And the left parties that are in the parliament, they are social democrats, and they don't fight for socialism and against liberalism and capitalism. So they frequently work together with some right parties, because they can agree on a lot of things. So Solidarity, among many other leftist parties, are outside the mainstream, but we are trying to grow the party and get together with other parties, to build a united front. And personally, I haven't done anything inside the party yet. I'm still pretty fresh. I joined maybe a month or so ago, and I've just been at a few meetings, and that's it. But I'm still proud of it, and there's from what I've heard on these meetings from the other people, I do think they are very competent people. Um, they've been in other parties and organizations themselves, and they've done things. And I feel like I'm in good hands, and I really hope that this can grow, this party and this unity with other leftist parties.
So your parliament is split between left-leaning and right-leaning political parties. What do you think your chances for success are in the future?
Could you repeat that?
Oh, yeah. So just given the fact that your parliament is currently split between right-leaning parties and left-leaning parties, what do you think with this new party that you're a part of and trying to reach out to other kind of like leftist parties, what do you think your potential for success is in the future? Like where do you see, like, how, like, is there a realistic possibility that your party can shape Swedish politics going down the road?
Yes. I hope so. Yeah. I mean, it's a long-term goal. I mean, of course everyone wants change to happen immediately, but there's a lot of radicalizing that needs to be done among the Swedish populace, because even though Sweden has for many years been generally very progressive or very left-leaning, it has since like the early 90s, late 80s been drifting toward the right. Like Olof Palme was our last like actual socialist prime minister. I don't know if you've heard about him. He's basically our own JF Kennedy. You know, Olof Palme was shot on the street. It was a whole thing in the 80s, and he was like he could be pretty anti-communist, but he could also be like doing deals with the Soviet Union, and he worked with Cuba, and I love this photo of him when he's like smoking cigars with Fidel Castro. But that was like the last proper actual left guy in charge of Sweden, and after that we have drifted more and more into like neoliberalism. So we are in a period right now, just like America, and frankly just like the rest of the West, we are in a period right now where both the left and unfortunately the far right, like fascists, are growing in popularity, because very few people are actually satisfied with the current status quo. And so I just hope that Solidarity and the rest of the anti-status quo left here in Sweden can pick up people. Yeah, because people want change, and things aren't really changing, or they are, but not for the better. So I'm trying to stay optimistic, but I don't know what we can do in the near future to shape policy other than, you know, slowly but surely find more and more people to radicalize, to educate, and hopefully someday we will have enough people on our side to actually really do something.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Well, in the last couple minutes, I got two more questions. These are things that I know that you wanted to address on the show today that I think are very, very interesting. And the first one has to do with video games and American military propaganda. Now, I'm not a gamer, but one of the things that I do know is that the Department of Defense, they employ about 30,000 public relations employees, and many of these people go and work on movie sets or in video game design studios and give the the creators of that content input into how the US military actually operates. So in a lot of American movies and video games, you can already tell that there's a heavy DoD influence on the way that that's portrayed. And this is something that I know that you're very passionate about. So as a gamer who spends time actually playing these games, talk to us a little bit about how American imperialism is often portrayed or maybe even propagated through these video games.
So the thing that you said that I actually think is good is when the American military is there to provide authenticity. Like, this is how we do things, this is how our operations operate, this is our equipment and what have you. Like, I like that for immersion and realism. But when it comes to like movies, video games, whatever, if you're using like actual props or whatever from the US military, and they are like in some kind of partnership with you, then they have authority to like change things to make themselves look good and what have you. Like like the latest Call of Duty, Call of Duty Black Ops 6. It takes place in like 1991. It's basically a new world order that's being established where the Soviet Union is like collapsing and what have you. And there's this splinter group of the CIA called Pantheon that is behind the scenes all over the world, and it's doing like terrorism and what have you. And they are trying to paint the CIA in a bad way, so that they can ultimately like take over the CIA, because they think they know how to run the CIA for this new upcoming world, and they don't think that the current CIA is good. And so this whole story is like, it feels so much like they can't just come out and say the CIA is fucking bad, they are terrorists. So they have to circumvent that by coming up with no, it's this splinter group, this group that used to belong to the CIA. They are the terrorists. The CIA are actually the good guys. and it's a lot of stuff like that, and that they do. I mean, not just Call of Duty, but that is like a prime example of American propaganda. Like how, like one of the most infamous missions is in the first Call of Duty Black Ops, that takes place inside of a Soviet gulag. And it's this supposed like hellscape, and it's basically like a concentration camp. And so people they play this and they just automatically think, oh, that's how a gulag is. But then if you're actually curious and you start learning, you start to learn that, oh, actually gulags weren't concentration camps, they were normal labor camps. Whatever you think about labor camps, that's what they were, not concentration camps. And it basically portrays socialist countries and history in a very bad light, and it portrays America in a very good light. And even in instances where there is like the big bad is an American, it's still like, oh, no, he's gone rogue. Whereas the rest of the American government, they're the good guys, and they are trying to stop him from like unleashing World War III or whatever. And then you have like other historical revisionism, like from the 2019 reboot of Modern Warfare, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, where there's this cutscene where a character is talking about the infamous Highway of Death. Have you heard about that one?
Mm-mm.
The Highway of Death?
No.
Shit, I don't remember the details, but it was like during the War on Terror, I think, and it was like might have been Iraqi forces, maybe, that were retreating on this highway, and like a large military force were retreating. Might have been Iraqi, I'm not sure. And they were retreating on this highway, and America just bombed the shit out of everyone, like a pure massacre. Like all retreating soldiers just boom. And which is why it became known as the Highway of Death.
Yeah, I think that was
And
wasn't that during Desert Storm? That was in '91, right? That was H.W. Bush, I think, when they kicked the Iraqis out of
maybe
out of Kuwait. I think that they were retreating back to Baghdad. And W. Bush didn't chase them all the way back up there, but he did kill quite a bit of them when they were in retreat.
Yeah, as I said, I don't remember the details. It's very blurry, but yeah, it might have been then. And basically, in this game, they instead say it was Russia. It was Russia that did this. They bombed the shit out of these retreating soldiers, which is just historic revisionism. And like, yeah, sure, it's a fictional video game where they can make up their own history. But if you actually think about it a little bit deeper, you can understand that the reason they say it's Russia is to, for a lack of better word, program the player into considering Russia to be the bad guys. Because, of course, they have to be the bad guys, so, they did it, not America.
Right.
Russia did it.
Well, and again, that goes back to the point you were making about creating these cultural frameworks. And and I know, again, I teach seventh graders, so like 12 and 13-year-olds, they all play video games. So if you grow up playing video games like that, it's going to limit the kind of questions that you can ask. The last thing that I wanted to talk to you about today too was the idea of 15-minute cities, which this is something that I think I've maybe read 2 articles on. I know that it's a debate, but it's not something that I'm very familiar and knowledgeable about at all. And it's something that you said before the show you wanted to discuss. So explain to my audience what a 15-minute city is and why you support the idea of the 15-minute city.
Yeah, so I don't. Do you remember when they started talking about that in America and this like outrage from Republicans?
Yeah, and that's why. And usually when the Republicans are mad about something, it's not that important, so I tend to ignore it.
Yeah, it's like this whole conspiracy theory that the American government wants to like limit where American citizens can travel. Um, but I don't think that's true. And the reason I personally support them is because, as far as I'm aware, it was actually the Soviet Union that basically started the 15-minute thing. And the whole premise behind it is that wherever you live, you should be able to reach everything you would need within walking distance. So you can still travel freely, whatever you want. You can still take a car, still ride a bike, still take a bus. But when it comes to things you need, like work or school or hospital or grocery store, I don't know, mechanic, like anything you would actually need, that you should be able to just walk, and it's just walking distance. And I think that's actually a really great idea, because like I hear about the insane distances in America, like, oh, I just had to travel like 1.5 hours to get to the closest store, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
That's an insane distance just to go to a store or something like that. And so like I understand if it's not for everyone, and of course not everyone should be forced to live in these kind of cities. But if you are living in a city or town for that matter, then I definitely think that you should, just for the fact of being a human being, I think you deserve to have things that you actually need, and you have these things close by, and you shouldn't have to travel very long to get to like the nearest hospital or to get to work or school or whatever. You should be able to just walk if you want to walk.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. Well, Erik, man, I know we've been going for about an hour now, so we got to wrap up. But dude, it's always great to talk to you. Before I let you go today, just tell my audience where they can find you, and plug anything you want.
Well, I'm on Twitter, pretty much. I can't even remember my Twitter handle, but maybe you can like link it in the description or something. Yeah. So there's where you can find me on Twitter, and I guess that's all I have to say. And of course, thanks for having me. I would have loved to also talk about school a little bit, but if time's out, then I'll just have to respect that.
Hey, well, I tell you, I think what we're gonna have to do is get you back on here in a month or two, and I'm sure because there are a ton of other things I wanted to ask you about today, so we'll make sure this happens again sometime soon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would love to come back again for a third time.
Yeah, heck yeah,
yeah. Once again, thank you so much for letting me come on here and just speak my mind.
Hey, Erik, always good having you, man. Thanks for coming on the show. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Protestant Libertarian Podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at theprotestantlibertarian@gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter. You can follow me at the handle @ProLibertyPod. Again, that is @ProLibertyPod. And you can also visit me at theprotestantlibertarianpodcast.com. At theprotestantlibertarianpodcast.com, you can also support the Christians for Liberty Network and the Libertarian Christian Institute. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, and we will see you next Tuesday.